In the United States, we often assume that conservatives and right-wingers are racist xenophobes, but many people hold racist and prejudicial attitudes regardless of their political ideology. However, why do they seem so commonplace in the right wing? Where do these fears and prejudicial attitudes come from? We have to understand racist attitudes and how they arise. If we have a clearer picture of its origins and the structures that propagate and support it, we are then in a better position to combat it. Of course, this isn't an exhaustive study about racism and its foundations in the United States, but I think Professors Cornel West and Richard Wolff gives us a good place to start. You can't talk about racism, anti-immigrant rhetoric, xenophobia, white nationalism, and the like without a critique of capitalism. Cornel West said it best while speaking on the Joe Rogan podcast. West stated, quote, "But all conceptions of race in the modern world are grounded in predatory capitalism, so that the talk about whiteness and blackness becomes a way of rationalizing social structures like slavery and Jim Crow, and it has to do with trying to extract labor, resources. It's an attack on their humanity and identity, but it's tied to economic structure. So to talk only about race means we hide and conceal the social structures that are generating unbelievable suffering for everybody. Everybody." End quote. Racism in the modern sense originates from our capitalist mode of production and the institutions that grow out of it to support and protect it. Slavery and Jim Crow are good examples where prejudicial attitudes were formulated to justify the exploitation and inhumane and unjust treatment of blacks. The denial of rights and political participation for blacks could have been difficult to maintain or justify if it was done arbitrarily. This is why racism was codified and institutionalized. Blacks were barred or unable to engage in political participation, discriminated against in housing, education, and employment. Blacks are painted as intellectually inferior, good for physical labor, criminal, sexual predators, lazy, and the whole swath of negative traits that rationalize their unjust treatment in society. This is similar to the underclass theory that was popularized in the second half of the 20th century, according to Professor Adolph Reed Jr. Poor people, particularly poor black and brown people, were demonized as lazy, stupid, crack babies, raised by welfare queens, had absent fathers, they didn't have morals, or lacked a strong work ethic. Hence the propagation of culture of poverty mythology. By painting poor people as culturally defective, it rationalized the lack of redistributive policies or a pervasive inequality and shifted the blame to individuals rather than structures or systems. It masked the destructive nature of capitalism and neoliberalism that have thoroughly destroyed the working class through the shipping away of industrial jobs, lack of wage growth, mass incarceration, destruction of unions, and deepening inequality. So we can see how racist and discriminatory attitudes arise as a means of concealing or rationalizing economic structures and the damage they inflict. Professor Wolff makes another significant addition. He stated recently on the Michael Brooks Show that when people are facing economic difficulty, they have a tendency to place themselves and others in groups to feel some sort of solidarity or security. This, combined with the demonization of the other, makes racism, homophobia, anti-immigrant rhetoric so prevalent. Professor Wolff uses the example of Brexit. Britons who are feeling the squeeze on their life see Brexit as a way of rejuvenating their economic interests. By leaving the EU and all those horrible Europeans behind, we can restore Britain to its greatness. Wolff states that the right-wing/conservative party are completely unfit to challenge capitalism's decline in England and offer nothing but scapegoating, hence the disdain for Eastern Europeans, migrants, and the like. So to sum this all up, we can see that these prejudicial attitudes arise from economic structures and are used to scapegoat other individuals for the failures of capitalism. It's a symptom of capitalism and the structures that reinforce and promote it, and not the cause. So where does this take us next? The right are doing a good job in performing the age-old trick of scapegoating people. Right-wing and far-right movements have surged in popularity this past decade. Groups like Alternative for Germany, the National Front in France, and the alt-right in the United States have gained widespread notoriety and media coverage. They're great at playing off the fears and anxiety of working-class people on the brink of losing it all. They've capitalized on the decline of capitalism to push its agenda. Whether it's demonizing migrants, blaming Mexicans for stealing jobs, banning Muslims from coming to the US, erecting a border wall, racism, homophobia, and the like, the right have galvanized their base in blaming a particular group of people for their woes. Moreover, we are witnessing the prominence of white nationalism or the white identity movement in the United States and in Europe. These are individuals who identify as white and feel that their American, European, Nordic, or Western European culture or values are being threatened by mass migration from Latin America, the Middle East, Jews, Asians, and other minorities. The only way out of this cultural and economic decline is by the elimination of these foreigners or dangerous elements through violence, strict immigration policies, disdain for interracial marriage, and the creation of a white ethno state. It's absolutely vile and disgusting. Now, the populist right enthusiastically voted Mr. Trump into office in 2016 for a variety of reasons, but I think primarily because he made himself look like an authoritarian strongman who was against corruption, against the status quo, who would rejuvenate and make America great again through fair trade deals and the protection of the forgotten man. Notwithstanding, he also demonized migrants and campaigned on the building of a border wall. These voters took a chance on Mr. Trump because he acted like he was different from the status quo, which was embodied in Hillary Clinton, the same status quo politics that led to the economic woes faced by the working class. This is not to say that the working class, specifically the white working class, is racist or nativist, or workers who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are struggling to make it, may be susceptible to an ideology that focuses on the demonization of other groups as the reason for their hardships. This scapegoating of groups is done to deflect criticism away from the economic system and onto the other groups. Interfighting between members of different identities prevents them from being unified against the capitalist order that reproduces the conditions that give rise to these attitudes. Again, to emphasize my point made in the beginning of this podcast, we need to understand the structures that propagate these prejudicial views in order to combat them. These are symptoms of economic decline, not the cause of it. But we can't give all the credit to the right wing. Left-wing parties or center-left parties in the United States and Europe have done a great deal in abandoning the working class. Historically, parties like the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, the Democratic Party in the USA, the SPD in Germany, and the Socialist Party in France were parties that workers used to further their demands and interests. Professors Thomas Piketty and Thomas Frank have shown through their research that these parties slowly embraced a new kind of constituency, the professional class. They are people who earn a lot of money, have advanced degrees and licenses, and they're highly educated. Thomas Frank has some compelling takes on this and how the Democratic Party gutted their own base. This came into fruition through the election of Bill Clinton, who passed the crime bill of 1994, welfare reform, deregulated Wall Street and the telecommunications industry, signed NAFTA, and was about to privatize Social Security. Obama continued the neoliberal turn by refusing to prosecute the Wall Street bankers who were responsible for our financial crash, deported over 3 million individuals, continued our militaristic foreign policy, and didn't push hard enough for healthcare reform, tried to push TPP, and so on and so on. A working class voter simply could not count on the Democratic Party as a vehicle to push their interests. This is why Bernie Sanders is doing so well, even though time and time again the media has tried to minimize his success and erase him from coverage. He frames issues as class and political issues, that there's a power difference between those on the top and those on the bottom. He tells voters that the system is rigged and based on greed and profit instead of benefiting working class Americans. This enables him to have so much broad appeal to voters regardless of their skin color or identity. Bernie is winning independents, former Trump voters, and has a lot of monetary support from veterans. It takes a political program grounded in the identification of our exploitative economic system and broad universal policies that bring out voters left and right. This is what makes Bernie Sanders special compared to your standard milquetoast liberal. Even though he is running in the Democratic primary, Bernie Sanders understands that it has to go beyond Washington insider politics in order to create real change. The real change comes from the bottom up through a mass movement. We need to start moving beyond conventional party politics. The Republican and Democratic Party are not in any shape or form fit to handle the rising economic issues that perpetuate racist and prejudicial attitudes. We have the Republican Party that seeks to exploit this anxiety and fear to their benefit by promoting bigotry, xenophobia against immigrants, foreigners, and other elements. The neoliberal Democratic Party is completely against any redistributive measures that aim to challenge money interests and the wealthy. It has exacerbated this insecurity and misery of the working people by signing NAFTA, creating welfare reform, not prosecuting the banks, and so forth. Its framework for equality through the promotion of social justice without economic justice rationalizes capitalism by promoting diversity without the much-needed critique and adjustments of our economic structure. It's clear that we need a political program and organizational strategy that goes beyond simple reformist policies and is grounded in economic justice, that which affects the livelihood of the working class regardless of identity. By challenging capitalism, we can begin to address the system that breeds and sustains racism, anxiety, prejudice, and the like, the symptoms of a system in decline.